Before I go deeper into what I'm sensing here, I want to pause on something. Because the very first thing I'm picking up isn't about you. It's about someone else. Someone who thought they understood you. Someone who thought they had you mapped out, figured out, categorized, someone who genuinely believed that what works on other people would work on you too. And what I'm feeling from their energy right now is something close to disorientation. A confusion they weren't prepared for. Almost like they reached for something that wasn't there anymore. Or maybe was never there to begin with. And there's a quiet triumph in this moment for you. Even if it doesn't feel triumphant. Even if right now you're still processing, still tired, still trying to make sense of the dynamic you've been navigating. Because something shifted, and they felt it, and they didn't expect it. Let me sit with this energy a little longer. I keep coming back to this image of a person, and this is the other person, the one who's been showing up in your life in this complicated way, a person who has built an entire identity around being able to read a room. Being able to read people. And they use that skill. They use it to stay in control. They use it to stay one step ahead. What they do is observe, they calculate, they figure out what someone needs to hear, what someone fears, what someone desperately wants, and then they use that. Not always consciously, actually. Some of this behavior is so deeply embedded in them that it's automatic. It's almost reflexive. They've been doing this so long they might not even recognize it as a strategy anymore. It's just how they move through the world. And what I'm seeing energetically is that this person's entire approach, the way they've been showing up with you, the little jabs disguised as jokes, the hot and cold behavior, the moments where they make you feel chosen and then suddenly pull back, the way they position themselves as somehow above the situation, all of that has been an attempt to keep you in a particular state. Uncertain. Reaching. Off balance. Does any of this feel familiar? Because I want to be very specific here, because this doesn't always look dramatic. It can be incredibly subtle. It can look like someone who just never fully commits to plans. Someone who makes you feel slightly guilty for having needs. Someone who gives you just enough warmth to keep you holding on, and just enough distance to keep you feeling like you haven't quite earned their full presence yet. And what I'm sensing is that you got tired of that. On some level, consciously or not, something in you stopped performing the role they needed you to perform. There's something here about a collapse. Not your collapse, theirs. An ego collapse. This person has been operating from a place of tremendous ego, not necessarily the loud, arrogant kind, though maybe it looks like that sometimes. I mean the kind of ego that is deeply fragile underneath a very polished surface. The kind that needs constant validation to feel okay. The kind that desperately needs to be seen as winning, as the one with more power, as the one who cares less. Because caring less, in their mind, is strength. Needing less is dominance. And they have crafted this whole persona around appearing like someone who needs nothing. And here's what's interesting to me. Because when someone like that encounters a person whose energy is genuinely rare, it almost short-circuits them. It doesn't compute. They reach into their usual toolkit and it just doesn't land. Let me talk about your energy for a moment, because the energy around you in this reading is striking. There's a depth to you that is not common. I don't say that to flatter you, I say it because I'm genuinely sensing it in what's coming through. There's something about the way you experience things, the way you feel things, the quality of attention you bring to people you care about, it's different. Some of you may have been told your whole lives that you're too much. Too sensitive. Too intense. Too emotional. Too in your head. And you may have internalized some of that as a flaw. But I want you to hear this, because it keeps coming through strongly. Your depth is not a problem to be solved. Your capacity to feel deeply, to love deeply, to care in a way that isn't performative or conditional, that is genuinely rare. And people can feel it. Even people who don't have the vocabulary for it. Even people who would never admit they feel it. This person, the one whose energy is all over this reading, they felt it. And in some distorted way, they were drawn to it, they wanted proximity to it, but they didn't know how to just receive it honestly. So instead they tried to manage it. They tried to contain it. They tried to make your energy serve them without giving anything real back. Take without being taken from. Receive without becoming vulnerable. There's so much pain underneath this person's behavior. I want to acknowledge that, because it's in the cards too. There's an unseen pain in their energy, something old, something that probably has very little to do with you specifically. This person has likely been hurt before. Probably in ways that made them conclude that the only safe position is the position of power. That love is a transaction, and only the person who cares less gets to walk away unscathed. That vulnerability is weakness. And I feel some compassion for that. I do. Because that's a painful way to exist. It really is. To be so afraid of being hurt that you build your entire emotional life around never being at risk of it. To mistake control for safety. To mistake distance for dignity. But here's where I need to be honest with you, because compassion for someone's wounds doesn't mean accepting the way those wounds are aimed at you. This is interesting, because at first I thought this was going to be a reading that was mostly about healing, about releasing, about moving on. But looking deeper, it feels more like a reading about recognition. About you recognizing something. And specifically about you recognizing that what was being offered to you in this dynamic was never equal. It was never balanced. The love or connection or attention that was being extended toward you had conditions on it, subtle as they were. There were unspoken requirements. You were expected to need them more than they needed you. You were expected to be grateful for whatever they gave, even when what they gave was inconsistent and confusing. And this brings me to something that feels quite heavy in the energy, this sense of having been taken for granted. This is real. For some of you, this was someone who benefited enormously from your presence, from your loyalty, your generosity, your emotional labor, your patience, and never stopped to fully acknowledge it. Maybe never stopped at all. Maybe they were so busy managing the narrative, so focused on maintaining their position of emotional superiority, that they never actually saw you. Not really. Not in the full, clear way that you deserve to be seen. Have you ever felt like you gave so much of yourself to someone and they just received it? Like there was no reciprocity, no genuine gratitude, just absorption? Like you were a resource that was being drawn from, but there was never any real effort to pour back into you? For some of you, this has been going on for a long time. And you may have rationalized it. You may have told yourself they were going through a difficult time, that they'd come around, that this is just how they show love, that you need to be more patient, more understanding. And some of that came from a genuinely loving place in you. But some of it, I want to gently say this, some of it came from a wound in you too. A part that has been conditioned to believe that love requires this much effort. That connection this complicated is just what intimacy feels like. It isn't. I want you to know that. What you're describing, this constant reaching, this uncertainty, this sense that you never quite know where you stand, that's not intimacy. That's someone else's unresolved pain, worn like a shield, aimed in your direction. The energy shifts here, and I want to follow it. Because something happened. Something changed in this dynamic, and it's the core of what this reading is really about. You stopped playing the expected role. Whether it was a specific moment or a gradual shift in your energy, something in you became less available to the game. And this is what shocked them. I keep hearing something like, they expected a reaction that didn't come. Or they expected you to chase, and you didn't. Or they made a move that was designed to unsettle you, and instead of being unsettled, you just stepped back. Became quiet. Maybe became clear. And for them, that was disorienting in a way they're still processing. Because when you don't react to a manipulation, when you don't flinch at the emotional bait, when you refuse to compete for the position of who cares less, you take away the entire game board. And someone whose sense of safety is built on controlling the game doesn't know what to do when the game simply stops. There's an embarrassment in their energy. And I don't use that word to be harsh, I use it because it's genuinely what I'm feeling. There's this quiet, humiliating realization dawning on them that they may have misjudged you. That they may have overplayed their hand. That the moves they made, whatever they were, instead of pulling you closer or keeping you uncertain, actually pushed something to a point of no return. And they didn't see it coming. Some of you are going to resonate with this next part. Because I want to speak to the version of this person who is now reaching back. Or who is suddenly being warmer. Or who has started showing up differently, more present, more attentive, more like the version of themselves you always sensed was in there. And I want to gently ask you, do you notice the timing? Do you notice that this shift in their behavior seems connected to yours? That their warmth appears in direct proportion to your withdrawal? Because that, too, can be a form of management. When someone who has been distant suddenly becomes available the moment you stop being as available, that's worth sitting with. It doesn't mean their feelings aren't real. But it does mean their feelings may be more about fear of losing than about genuine evolution. And only time and consistent behavior will tell you which one this is. Take what resonates here and leave what doesn't. This is a collective reading and not every detail will apply to every single situation. I want to come back to you now. Because I've been spending time in their energy and it's heavy, and I want to bring this reading back to where it belongs, which is with you, and your growth, and what you're stepping into. Something is very clear to me. You are not the same person you were when this dynamic began. And I don't mean that as a consolation. I mean it as an observation of genuine transformation. There is a groundedness in your energy now that wasn't there before. A knowing. Something quiet but firm. The kind of thing that happens when you've been pushed to the edge of what you're willing to accept and your nervous system just finally says, no more. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just clearly. And that clarity is precious. It's hard-won. It usually only comes after a certain amount of confusion and hurt and second-guessing and patience that extended maybe a little further than it should have. It comes from walking through something difficult and arriving on the other side realizing that you're still standing. And that you're standing differently than before. There's something about love being unbalanced in this energy, and not just in terms of how much each person gave. But in terms of how the love was held. Your love, your care, your investment in this connection, it was held with openness. With sincerity. With genuine desire for something real. Their love, or whatever version of it they were offering, was held with conditions. With calculations. With one hand extended and the other hand ready to pull back if the power dynamic shifted unfavorably. That's not love. That's a negotiation. And you deserve someone who is not negotiating when they're loving you. I feel strongly that this reading is arriving for you at a time when you are standing at a threshold. Not the dramatic, catastrophic kind. More like a quiet door. A place where the path ahead is becoming clearer even if it's not fully illuminated yet. And the question this energy is asking you is, what do you want to walk toward? Not what do you want to fix, or who do you want to heal, or how do you want this situation to resolve, but what do you genuinely, honestly want to walk toward? Because the version of you who began this reading, who entered this dynamic, who gave so much of their rare and precious energy to someone who didn't know how to hold it with care, that version of you was perhaps more focused on the other person's journey than their own. More attentive to what the other person needed, what they might be going through, why they were the way they were. And there's beauty in that empathy. But there comes a point where empathy for others needs to make room for clarity about yourself. This is a moment of you choosing yourself. Not in a performative, loud way. In a quiet, deep, rooted way. The kind of choice that doesn't need to be announced to anyone. It's just a reorientation. A turning toward your own light. And here's what I want you to carry with you. The fact that their games didn't work on you, that is evidence of your strength. Not evidence that you're cold, or unfeeling, or that you've become someone closed off. It's evidence that somewhere along the way, you developed enough self-awareness to recognize when something isn't right, even when it's packaged in something that looks like connection. That's not a small thing. A lot of people spend years in dynamics like this without ever arriving at that clarity. You did. You're here. You're not imagining this energy. You're not overreacting. You're not being dramatic or too sensitive or reading too much into things. What you experienced was real. What you felt was accurate. Your instincts were correct. I'm also hearing, and this comes through softly but consistently, I'm hearing something like someone wanting to say, I'm sorry I didn't see you sooner. And I'm not sure if that's from this person, or from a part of yourself that you're beginning to reconcile with, or both. But it's there. A tenderness around being seen. A grief, very small and very quiet, about having been unseen for a period of time. Seen partially, but not fully. Valued for what you could give, but not for what you simply are. You are more than what you can give to people. Sit with that for a moment. The energy is beginning to settle now. There's a kind of stillness entering the reading that feels like resolution, not the kind of resolution where everything is figured out and wrapped up neatly, but the kind that feels like, okay. Okay, I understand something now that I didn't understand before. And I can work with this. Whatever comes next in this situation, whether this person comes back in a more genuine way, whether distance continues to grow, whether a final conversation happens or doesn't, I sense that you will navigate it from a different place than you've been navigating from. You've already done the hardest part, which is finding your way back to yourself in the middle of a dynamic that was trying, on some level, to pull you away from yourself. Trust that. Trust the version of you that stopped performing. Trust the version of you that chose quiet over performance, that chose stillness over chasing, that chose your own discernment over the urgency of someone else's emotional timeline. You carry something rare. Something not everyone has. And the right people, the people who are meant to truly be in your life, won't need you to dim it, manage it, or make it smaller so they can feel comfortable. They'll meet it. They'll match it. Or they'll grow toward it. But they won't make you feel guilty for having it. That's what you're moving toward. Slowly, in your own time, in your own way. But you are moving toward it.